There's a story in the Bible that is written for those of us who don't have it all together. Aren't you encouraged? You see, for some, though, admitting any kind of need is difficult because, well, maybe they're too invested in having it all together, or at least looking like it. Vulnerability doesn't feel like an option. I mean, what would people think? Well, Jesus says that being vulnerable is actually a requirement of faith, and God loves faith. In Luke 8:41-56, we meet three characters. Each of them are in a desperate situation. You might say that they don't have it all together. Now, watch how they come to Jesus just as they are, vulnerable and desperate at the risk of being embarrassed or exposed in front of a huge crowd. It reads like this. Then a man named Jairus, a leader of the local synagogue, came and fell at Jesus' feet, pleading with him to come home with him. His only daughter, who was about 12 years old, was dying. As Jesus went with him, he was surrounded by the crowds. Now, you have to understand, Jairus is a leader. He's a leader of the synagogue who comes to Jesus desperate for help as his little girl is sick and dying. And instead of keeping it all together and sending a representative as a leader would normally do, Jairus runs to Jesus himself and he throws himself at Jesus' feet, begging Jesus to come. He's desperate. His love for his daughter has left him utterly vulnerable. And then, well, there's the little girl. It's easy to forget how about her. See, she's 12 years old and she's dying. Well, she too is utterly vulnerable, though she's in no place to do anything about it. In verses 43-44, we meet a woman, and she's also desperate in need of Jesus' help. It says, a woman in the crowd had suffered for 12 years with constant bleeding, and she could find no cure. Coming up behind Jesus, she touched the fringe of his robe. Well, the woman is nearly the exact opposite of Jairus. I mean, she's not a leader, and she has no social standing in the community, and she has no advocate to send on her behalf. And due to her bleeding condition, she's lived on the fringe as an outsider, isolated from community. She, too, has been rendered desperate. And for this reason, she braves the crowd, making herself vulnerable, seeking only to touch the cloak of this healer. We go on to read that Jesus heals the woman and he goes to Jairus' house and raises the little girl from the dead, each one with just a touch, and each one coming to Jesus just as they are. You see, each in their own way were vulnerable. Each in their own way were desperate. Which one do you identify with? Maybe the leader who finds that all the usual advantages and experience that go with his office has left him with nothing, or maybe the woman, the one who has endured much and isn't sure she can bear anymore, or perhaps the little girl, the one who is helpless, utterly dependent on others. Whichever one you identify with, Jesus says, come as you are. I will heal you spiritually, physically, emotionally, but I need you to come to me. This is an act of faith. When we drop our need to have it all together and we say, Jesus, here I am, just as I am, broken, weary, desperate of your help. I need a touch from you. And this is exactly what Jesus responds to. And he meets us right there, right in the midst of crowds of people that may find Jesus intriguing or even feel proud to be associated with him. But he stops for the one that comes to him with no holding back. So, you don't have to have it all together. In fact, please don't, or you may miss out on an encounter with Jesus that will change your life because, well, that's courageous living.